Hi everyone, it's me Anna. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. And a couple of days ago I thought it'd be fun if I told you about a few books that have genuinely surprised me, shocked me. And so I've got a list of 8 books like that. This list contains a couple of genres, but mostly it's fantasy, science fiction, a little bit of horror maybe, or literary fiction. I think let's just get straight into the list. And the first book on the list has been the most shocking book I have ever read. It's The Dark Tower by Stephen King, which is the last book in the Dark Tower series. So this book has the same title as the series itself. The first book in the series starts with a gunslinger whose name is Roland, standing in the middle of nowhere, basically. If my memory serves me right, because to be honest, I read the first book so many years ago that I can't recall any details actually, but this image of him standing in the middle of a desert is still in my mind, pretty vivid. So I think that is definitely what we see at the beginning of the story. At least it's one of the things that the story begins with. And so at the beginning of the series, we're told that the world has moved on. Something's now definitely wrong in the whole world, or at least in the world where our main protagonist Roland lives in. And the core of his world and all the worlds together, all the universes, is the Dark Tower. And so in the first book, Roland is about to begin his journey of seeking the Dark Tower in order to make a difference, get the world back to its better days. On this long journey, Roland obviously meets many different people, different characters. They're such complicated but beautiful and heartwarming and touching friendships, companionships. I love this series with all my heart, but the last book, which is actually on this list today, shattered me. It shattered me completely. I'm not gonna give you any spoilers, but I will say that the ending itself, the ending of the entire series, is literally nothing compared to what actually broke me in this book while I was reading it. I had so many conflicting emotions while I was reading The Dark Tower. I mean, the last book in the series. Some moments were so devastatingly heartbreaking. Some moments were healing though. I felt just so conflicted and so emotional, and I was so mentally drained by the end of the book that when I read the last chapter, when I read the actual ending, I could not feel anything anymore. I could not feel anything. I was shocked, definitely. I think the ending was impossible to predict, and I think it is officially impossible to predict. I don't know if you read this series, if you read the last book. Let me know in the comments if you saw it coming, because I genuinely think, okay, I'm not speaking on behalf of everyone, of course, but in my humble opinion, I think even if you've read plenty of fantasy books and, I don't know, you can foresee some, I don't know, plot forks or plot twists, reveals, that ending is just crazy. It's crazy. I mean, after I finished the book, I realized what kind of author Stephen King actually is, what kind of mindset he has, and what message he put into the series. It's so much more than just a fantasy series with battles, complicated world building. It's just so much more. And I personally think that the ending is neither good nor bad. I just kind of accepted it at that time, as the reader, and moved on. I mean, I still haven't moved on, honestly. I still haven't moved on. I don't know if I ever will. Yeah, I don't want to tell anything more about this series because I don't want to spoil anything. I still love the ending. Like, it still seems very controversial, but I think no matter how you receive the ending, it's still worth reading. It's worthy of your attention. If you're into fantasy, or especially if you're a Stephen King fan, I think it's definitely worth giving it a try. That is my take on The Dark Tower. And the next book on my list is also by Stephen King. It's Gerald's Game. I would say it's a horror book maybe, but not just like completely horror. I would say it's psychological fiction. So Gerald's Game begins with a woman that ends up being cuffed to a bed, and her husband has a heart stroke. He dies just next to the bed. The cuffs on her wrists are very real, like the kind of cuffs that the police use. No matter how hard she tries, she cannot get out of them. She can't unfasten them. She's just in such a vulnerable position. And so basically that's how the story begins. Also, I forgot to mention that she's in a cottage in the middle of a forest, some sort of. There's nowhere near that cottage, so no one can hear her, even if she screams her lungs out, which she does, of course. No one can rescue her. Yeah, she ends up in that situation. But then, all these creepy things happen. At night, she starts hearing some strange noises, or even like seeing some shadows. She becomes very frightened for her life. And why I love this book so much is not only because it was very interesting to watch her in such a situation, and how she would get out of it, if she would even get out of it. Like I mentioned before, I think I could put it under the psychological genre, because by laying in bed, she starts seeing dreams that conjure up her childhood memories, and that's where the psychological aspect begins. And yeah, I genuinely think it's a very good book, because I think it blends all these elements like horror, psychology very well. And why the ending of this book was really shocking to me is simply because of the reveal. Yeah, I don't want to say much, but while I was reading that book, I could not even think of anything going in that direction. I did not expect to find out what I found out at the end of the book. And that big reveal is not really related to our main protagonist, but it was still, it is somehow related, but not directly to her. So the reveal is not about her, I would say. And I love that book so much. I think the adaptation is also good, by the way. Okay, let's move on to our next book, which is a thriller, psychological thriller. And the title is The Silent Patient. Now, I had never read a thriller before I read this book. That was my first kind of big thriller. At least it seemed, big to me because of the ending. Not only because of the ending, I enjoyed everything in that book. I enjoyed all the plot twists, I enjoyed the characters, I enjoyed the investigation process. The book is about this silent patient, a woman who, as we're told, murdered her husband. And after that happened, she's been silent for years. She won't speak to anyone. So she's put in a mental hospital, and our main character, who's, as far as I remember, he's a doctor. Yeah, he's not a police officer. I think he's her doctor. He decides to kind of, dig deeper and investigate this cause, find out why she's silent, and find some evidence of why she could be quiet about it. So yeah, that's the premise. And I'm gonna tell you, again, I haven't read many thrillers in my life. I don't know much about thrillers, but still, the ending was so terrifyingly shocking. My jaw was on the floor. At first, it seemed a little bit confusing because it was like all at once, being discovered, being resolved, and I needed some time to process things. But when all the puzzles clicked in my head, hands down, the best book of that year. Or maybe not the best book of the year, okay, but one of the best books, for sure, one of the best books of the year when I read it. I think I read it in 2024, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So that is The Silent Patient. The next book is a sci-fi, and I have it right here, which is Project Hail Mary. This was my first full sci-fi, and I pretty much enjoyed it. I would even honestly advise you don't read the premise and just let the author tell you everything, because the premise gives away one detail that was actually very, very surprising, pleasantly surprising to me when I was reading the book. And even though it happens pretty much at the beginning of the story, still it doesn't happen at the very, very beginning. So it happens when you've already spent quite some time with the main character. That was just so good to find out. So the premise that I will tell you now is going to be very short because, like I said, just let the book tell you everything. This is about a man, a science or physics teacher, that wakes up in a spaceship and he doesn't remember anything about himself. He doesn't even remember his name. He doesn't know how he ended up where he is now. And as the story progresses, he remembers more and more and more about himself, about his life before, how he got here, what he's doing here, why he's doing what he's doing, and other things. I don't want to talk much about this book because I'm gonna talk about it in my November wrap-up, but speaking of the ending in particular, I can say that that kind of ending is like completely unpredictable. It's not like, it's just one of the ways where our story could go. I think you can actually think of all those ways. I was not shocked in that way. I was rather just impressed and touched. I was awestruck. I was impressed. I was so impressed by the ending, and I think the ending is so bittersweet, but it's so touching and it's so beautiful. But this bittersweetness has a good flavor to it. Anyway, I want to save some of my thoughts on this book for my November wrap-up, so I think I will leave it at that for now. And we're getting into the fantasy section, which I want to start off with Iron Flame. Iron Flame is the second book in the... I don't remember the name of the series, unfortunately. Actually, I do. I always pronounce it wrong, so I don't want to say it. I'll just leave the title somewhere on screen. This is a dragon fantasy with an academy setting. In the first book, our main protagonist, after studying, what is it? Like transcribing things, is for some reason transferred to a completely different department. Now she's about to start training to become a fighter, a dragon rider to be precise. There is a lot of countries, a lot of places in this world where we're set, and our academy protects our part of the world from our enemies. The enemies are human-like. I don't want to give away much about like what they look like or about their abilities or anything like that, but they're human-like, and I love when enemies are human-like in books. I really love the concept of these enemies. I think it's so cool, and it's just interesting for me to read them. Also, to become a dragon rider, you have to bond with your dragon and you have to be chosen by a dragon to try to become his rider. The first book I did not enjoy as much as I thought I would, but this one, Iron Flame, is my favorite so far of the series. There's currently 3 books out. I know a lot of people hate it. I loved it. I loved every second of it. There were a lot of like war strategies and dynamics, more exploration of some other characters. The ending is, it's that type of ending where this information is just thrown in your face and you're just sitting staring at a wall and just automatically starting to build theories in your head and thinking of how it could ever be resolved. I immediately grabbed the third one because I could not wait. It's a crazy cliffhanger. Without spoiling much, I can only say that something horrifying happens to one of our main characters. Anyway, just a fun fantasy series with dragons, battles, cool villains. Well, the next book is actually the third book in the same series, which is Onyx Storm. The thing is, I think in Iron Flame, that cliffhanger kinda made sense because I could see the clear connection, between that cliffhanger and like the overall plot. I did not see it coming, but it's pretty much possible to kind of not predict, but it's just possible to at least think of. In Onyx Storm, it's not. When I was reading the last chapter, it was not even like any build up to that. So it's just like, you know, a regular battle, that kind of stuff. Nothing was like overly surprising. But then literally just in the last paragraph, the cliffhanger happens. It does not really make sense, I think, until you've read the next book, which hasn't been released yet. But the cliffhanger in Onyx Storm, the third book, still had the same effect on me. I just think that in Iron Flame it was really like it really made sense, you know, it just made sense. And yeah, it was shocking, but I could see how it happened. But in Onyx Storm, yeah, I'm sure it will eventually make much more sense once I've read the fourth book. But yeah, we're still waiting for it to be released. So the next book is also part of a series. It's the Crescent City series, and I'm now talking about the second book in this series as well, House of Sky and Breath. This is an urban fantasy series with a lot of different creatures. In the first book, our main protagonist has to investigate some death. I don't actually remember much about the first book because I did not really love the first book, to be honest. Just so many things happening. You need to give the first book some time to sink in. At least that was my experience. I would just say that like the main elements of the first book are investigation, you know, different types of fantasy creatures, enemies to lovers, cooperation with the government, so that you have a general picture of what happens in the first book. Overall, I love this series. I know a lot of people think that the second book is actually really boring. It was not for me. I was invested in everything happening in the second book. The cliffhanger just added to it. Someone at the end of the second book gets to experience a change of location, I would say. Yeah, the second book just ends in like just the craziest way possible. If you're reading the second book and don't have the third one at hand, I suggest you go get it now because you will need it. So that is House of Sky and Breath in the Crescent City series. And the last book on my list today is Phantasma, which is also part of a trilogy. It's the first book in the trilogy. The trilogy is called The Wicked Games. Phantasma has a huge trial aspect. I'm not a fan of trials in a book, but Phantasma also has a lot of gothic elements, which I found to be really engaging. I personally love gothic stories. Also, Phantasma is pretty much focused on apparitions and exploring that theme of the world. Apparitions, you know, phantoms like ghosts, demons. I think that was the first apparition type of book that I'd read, maybe, at least if we're talking about fantasy, okay, because this is pretty much a fantasy book. It has a romance too, and the ending of this book was just one huge reveal about one of our main characters, and when I say who, so as not to spoil anything. I was really engaged in the plot, in those apparition type of characters. There's a lot of mystery, riddles, trials, ghosts, obviously. The ending left me so surprised at how the story went. The only thing that I did not love about the ending is how rushed it was. I thought everything was revealed and resolved so quickly that I wanted to stay a little bit more in that world with those characters, but after everything was resolved. But it was wrapped up so quickly that I was just like, everything happened just like a few minutes ago and we're already done, like the story is over. I wanted to see more of our characters' feelings and thoughts on everything. I think it lacked that a little bit, but overall I loved the book, I loved the ending, it was really good. So I think that brings us to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and let me know in the comments if you've read any of those books, or if you haven't read any, let me know which you're currently reading, and I will see you in the next video.